Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. In this video, I'm going to break down the research that is fantasy relevant to identify the best plays for the tight end position and defensive special teams position in Week 7 of the NFL. Oftentimes, the tight end defensive special team positions aren't researched as much as the other positions, but they hold the same value, over 11%, as the quarterback position and flex positions in your lineups. With that in mind, this is why I'm never willing to punt any position. Before I dive into the numbers, I want to take a quick look back at week 6. I do this to show a correlation between the fantasy relevant numbers that I am interested in. The top 5 projected tight ends in week 6 were Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, Disley, and Andrews. The actual top 5 scoring tight ends were Hooper from Atlanta with 28.70 points, Kittle from San Francisco with 21.30 points, Andrews from Baltimore, 14.90 points, Ricky Seals-Jones from Cleveland with 13.70 points, and Darren Fells from Houston with 12.90 points. Only 8 points separated the number 5 tight end and the number 20 scoring tight ends. These top 5 tight ends had a total of 37 targets for 90.5 fantasy points, which is 2.45 fantasy points per target. This averaged out to 7.4 targets and 18.10 fantasy points for the top 5 tight ends in week 6. There's a lot of variance from week to week with the tight end position, but identifying the tight ends with the most targets provide a nice place to start, as well as factoring in matchups, snaps, and red zone targets. The top targeted tight ends through the first 6 weeks are as follows. Number 1 is Hooper. He's received 50 targets, which comes out to 8.33 targets per game. He's scored a total of 113 fantasy points. Number 2 is Ingram. He's had 48 targets in 5 games, and that comes out to 9.6 targets per game. So he's actually doing better than Hooper, but he's only played 5 games. Number 3 is Andrews from Baltimore. He's received 47 targets. It comes out to 7.8 targets per game. Number 4 is Waller from Oakland. He's received 42 targets, which comes out to 8.4 targets per game. Number 5 is Kittle. He's received 37 targets, which comes out to 7.4 targets per game. This totals to 224 total targets between the top 5 tight ends through the first 6 weeks. They've scored 446 total fantasy points, which equals to 1.99 fantasy points per target. The week 6 average was 0.46 higher, so it's just slightly higher. With the tight end, I also want to consider matchups, and these are the tight ends these are the teams that are giving up the most points to the tight end position in week 7. Number 32, Arizona. They're allowing 20.8 points per game to the tight end position. This week they face Evan Ingram from the Giants. The number 30 team is Indianapolis. They're allowing 13.5 fantasy points per game to the tight end. This week they face Darren Fells and Atkins from Houston. Number 29 is Seattle. They're allowing 12.9 fantasy points per game to the tight end. This week they get Baltimore's Andrews and Hurst. Number 26 is Detroit. They have allowed 11.9 fantasy points per game to the tight end. This week they play Minnesota, and their tight end is Rudolph. And number 24 is Tennessee. They are allowing 10.8 fantasy points per game to the tight end. And this week they face the Chargers and Hunter Henry, who's back. I also want to consider the teams that are giving up the least amount of fantasy points each week to the tight end. Now, if they haven't faced a team that relies on the tight end or a decent tight end, this could skew their numbers a little bit. But these are the teams right now that are giving up the least amount of fantasy points to the tight end position. Leading the way is Buffalo. They allow 4.3 fantasy points per game to the tight end. This week they're going to be facing Miami, and their tight end is Gesicki. Number 3 is San Francisco. They're allowing 5.1 fantasy points per game. This week they face Washington, and their tight ends are Vernon Davis and Jeremy Sprinkle. Number 4 is Houston. They're allowing 5.7 fantasy points per game. This week they face Indianapolis' Ebron and Doyle. Number 5 is Green Bay. They allow 6.4 fantasy points per game. This week they face Oakland and Darren Waller. And number 6, the New York Giants. They're allowing 7.1 fantasy points per game. This week they're facing Clay and Williams from Arizona. Touchdowns have a lot of variance from week to week for every position, but identifying those who receive touches and or targets in the red zone can give you an edge. The following tight ends have received the most targets in the red zone through the first 6 weeks. Green Bay's Jimmy Graham. He's had 7 red zone targets. 4 of those have been inside the 10-yard line. Detroit's TJ Hawkinson, the rookie. He's received 7 red zone targets. 4 of those have been inside the 10. New York Giants, Evan Ingram, 6 red zone targets in 5 games, and 4 of those 6 have been inside the 10-yard line. Hooper from Atlanta, 6 red zone targets. 3 of those have been inside the 10. And Kittle from San Francisco, he's received 6 red zone targets. 2 of those have been inside the 10. And Houston's Fells has received 5 red zone targets, with 1 of those inside the 10. Baltimore's Andrews has also received 5 targets, 1 inside the 10. The Rams' Everett has received 5 red zone targets, all 5 inside the 10. Tennessee's Walker has received 5 red zone targets, 1 inside the 10. And Cincinnati's Eifert has received 5 red zone targets with 4 inside the 10. So you're probably asking, how do we make sense of all this? Really, your guess is as good as mine. Just kidding. These are the tight ends that I'm going to be targeting in week 7, and I'm going to tell you why. Hooper from Atlanta. He's $5,300, which is considerably less than the top tight end. It looks like it's going to be Kittle at $6,700. So Hooper's coming in at $5,300 in the game that is projected to be the highest scoring on the slate. He's receiving 8.33 targets per game. He's scoring 19.3 fantasy points per game. He's had 6 red zone targets, 3 inside the 10. I like the salary. I'm going to watch the ownership, see if people are spending down. He probably will be pretty popular. But I really like Hooper. He was in the winning Millie Maker lineup last week, and I will definitely have my share of him in my lineups this week. Next, Ingram from the Giants. I'm not real crazy about the salary. $6,500, it makes a lot of sense. I'm going against the worst team, against the tight end. If I can spend up on some lineups to get to him, I will have my share of him as well. Barkley's back this week as well. But this is a really good fantasy matchup. He's averaging 17.8 fantasy points per game. As I mentioned, Arizona's giving up the most fantasy points per game at 20.8 fantasy points per game. He's getting 9.6 targets per game, and it's one of the highest total games, 3rd highest at 49 points. So if I can get up to Ingram, I will definitely have my share of him as well. Number 3 is Andrews. He's $4,900. I really like the salary and value compared to the others, and I'm going to watch ownership. If he's lower owned, I might take more chances on him. and save a little bit of money than spending up. He's averaging 7.8 targets per game, 16.3 fantasy points per game. Seattle is the third worst, allowing 12.9 fantasy points per game. He's had 5 red zone targets, and he's in the game that has the second highest total on the board. I think there's going to be a lot of points in that Seattle-Baltimore game, and Andrews could definitely be involved in it. And as I mentioned, I really, really like his point or his salary at $4,900, with almost $1,800 difference from Kittle. Next is Jimmy Graham. From Green Bay. He's 4,200. Now he's not showing up in any of the fantasy relevant statistics. However, he could go under own. And one statistic it's not him, but Detroit's allowing 11.9 fantasy points per game. And with Adams and Allison hurt, you can see Graham. Somebody's got to get those targets in. It could potentially be Jimmy Graham. And I really love the savings of $4,200. He might be a really good target. The game total's 47, so definitely have him in the player pool. Next is Hawkinson from Detroit. They're playing Minnesota. He's had 7 red zone targets, 4 of them inside the 10. There's going to be a lot of attention going towards Kenny Galladay. Minnesota is going to probably give a lot of attention to him. His salary is only $3,600, so big time value if he can get some decent target share. You can see it's not going to take much for him to get value at that salary. Number 6 is Waller from Oakland. He's $4,700. They're playing Green Bay. The matchup, Green Bay is not giving up a lot of points to the tight end position. But Tyrell Williams for Oakland could be out, and this is another example. Those targets are going to have to go somewhere, and Oakland's probably going to have to throw the ball to stay in the game with Green Bay. He's getting 8.4 targets per game, and he's scoring 15.3 fantasy points per game. Derek Carr is definitely trying to get the ball to him. I also have interest in Hunter Henry from the Chargers. Tennessee's allowing 10.8 fantasy points per game. This is his second game back. He received 7 targets in the game against Pittsburgh and scored 2 touchdowns. Definitely like Henry, and his salary is only $4,000. So there's a lot of value. You notice that Kittle's missing off the tight ends that I like in particular this week. I don't know that San Francisco is going to have to throw the ball a lot to beat Washington. And, I mean, if they run the ball more than any other team in the NFL right now, so I don't feel like there's enough targets for for him to get value at 6,700. I mean, I don't like that price. I don't like that game script. And so I'm actually fading George Kittle this week. So summing it all up, my tight ends this week will be Hooper, Ingram, Andrews, Graham, Hawkinson, Waller, and Henry. And I pay real close attention to the ownership. I like to target tight ends that are in the higher projected scoring games. There's definitely some mismatches. I feel like one of the biggest mismatches is the Ingram matchup against Arizona. Patrick Peterson's back, so you could see a situation where he could possibly shadow Tate, which would just leave Barkley and Ingram for the quarterback Jones. Okay, now it's time to find the ever elusive defensive special teams. I have been focusing on this. What I've been doing this year is I've been focusing on the smaller home favorites and going against teams that pass a lot more than they run, because that sets up sacks, fumbles, interceptions, um, anything that makes the quarterback erratic can cause things to go bad in a hurry. Those are the defenses that I've been liking to target, and I've actually been doing pretty well on getting it right week to week. There's a lot of variance in it. I don't just simply scroll down to Miami at 1,500 so that I can have more money at every other position. I don't punt any position. The defense special team is as valuable as the quarterback on your lineup. It makes up 11% of the scoring. So I want to definitely find value, and I try to have a spend up team that I'm targeting, a middle range team, and then a lower range team. I do like the home teams and the smaller favorites. And like I said, I like games and to think about game script where the other team could possibly be in a position where they're going to have to throw the ball, and because a lot of things can go wrong when you got to throw the ball. So with that being said, first, the top 5 projected defenses in week 6 were the Seahawks, Cowboys, Rams, Ravens, and Titans. The actual top 5 scoring were the Broncos, who led the way with 23 points. Then it dropped off considerably. The Saints were next with 11 points. Redskins were third with 10 points. 49ers were next with 10 points. And the Seahawks were at fifth with 9 points. So other than the top defense, the rest of the top 5 were within 2 points of each other. And that's what I'm saying. Defenses have a lot of variance. I don't like to really spend up for the top one. This week in particular, Buffalo's 4,300, and I'll get to that in a second. But when you're spending 4,300, that's a position player, and to get value on that, you pretty much need a defensive special teams touchdown. And I never really count the 10 points that you get for a shutout. It's happened this year, but it happened last week in the Denver game. But I don't really count on that. As I mentioned, I'm really looking for sacks, because sacks set up a lot of things to go wrong, and I like defenses that are going to put the quarterbacks in positions to maybe make uncomfortable plays. So with that being said, these are the defenses that I'm going to focus on this week. The Giants, they're $2,500. They're averaging 2.7 sacks per game. Arizona throws the ball a lot, and they do run a lot of plays, which sets up the stage for a lot of opportunities. I'm pretty sure Arizona is going to score, but I feel like they're going to have the ball in the air a lot. With a rookie quarterback, I feel like this is going to set the stage for some sacks and possibly some turnovers. Really like that price at 2,500. They'll probably check the ownership right now. If I see, Giants are actually they're pretty low owned. They're actually under 1% on the site that I use for that. So I definitely like the Giants, and they do offer some value at $2,500, which allows me to have some salary in other positions. Next is, as I mentioned, is Buffalo. You always have to consider the top defense if you can get to them. I won't cut a player for someone that is not supported by numbers, just so I can get a top defense. But Buffalo's, as I mentioned, is 4,300. It's kind of been the go-to term so far this season. Play the defense that's playing Miami. So it's like, do I need to say more? But if Fitzpatrick is forced to pass, this could be a defense special teams paradise against Buffalo. They build a lead, they're not going to be able to get back in the game and they're a 17-point home favorite. If they build a lead, and the only thing that Miami can do is throw the ball around, I see the potential for Buffalo to have a phenomenal game. But you do have to get quite a lot to get that value for the 4,300. If ownership stays where it is right now, which is, let's take a quick look at ownership for, they're 3.6%. They're actually the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're actually the ninth highest owned. So I might actually try to spend up to get to them. A lot of ownership right now is going to the Chargers, which is they're going to be playing Tennessee, and the Chargers defense actually. Let's take a look here. Is it a price thing? No, they're 3,100. Well, they're $1,200 less than the Bills, and that's probably why the ownership is so low. Is because of the price. So, but you definitely have to consider whatever team is playing against Miami. It's just been the go-to statistics through the first 6 weeks. The last team that I'm going to consider are the Bears. They're 3,000, and I love the salary. I love the matchup. They're averaging 3.4 sacks per game. They're a small home favorite. They're averaging 13 defense special teams points, fantasy points per game at home. They're, I think they have, yeah, they have have the second highest ownership right now, which may or may not deter me, but seems at their price, it seems like be able to get to them and get the value at 3,000 shouldn't be that hard to get to. So, and I definitely like that matchup in Chicago. So those are the three teams that I'm going to be focusing on in week 7. It's a small core group. Like I said, I like to have one spin down option, one mid range option, and then a spin up option. And the Giants, Buffalo, and the Bears are the teams that I'm interested in. They're home favorites, and they fit the criteria that I'm looking for when I pick defenses for my lineups. As I mentioned, there's a lot of variance at this position, so I try to go with the game script that could create a lot of passing plays, which sets up the quarterback, kind of like with wide receiver targets. Quarterbacks could be targets for defensive special teams. So the research is done, and all we have left to do is put this all together, which we will do tomorrow with the lineup video and the game individual game breakdown video. We'll be doing them simultaneously. Thank you for joining me. I ask you to please hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified when the next video posts. Feel free to drop any comments or opinions below. I'll answer them up until game time, as many as I can. As I mentioned, I'll be back tomorrow with the lineup building and game by game breakdown video. My name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports, and I'll see you real soon.